Hey, everybody, it's David of Strong by Lead. Thanks so much for tuning in for the next few minutes. I hope it doesn't last too long. I want to talk to you about high intensity interval training. What is high intensity interval training? Why should I care about high intensity interval training? What are the differences between high intensity interval training? Are there any controversies surrounding high intensity interval training? And to the last question, yes, there are. I want to talk to you about this. This can be controversial, and I want to talk to you about high intensity interval training. Number one, because it is a common topic. But why is it a common topic? Because there's so much information out there about high intensity interval training. As a personal trainer, I find it my responsibility to help educate people. Now, I am not posing as a PhD expert with 20, 30, 40 years of experience in exercise science, but I know, at least I think I do, I know enough about how to read research studies so I can differentiate between what actually applies to the general public and what actually doesn't. High intensity interval training, HIIT, as it's commonly shortened in the vernacular, is one of those things that tend to be portrayed differently in research versus general fitness. And I think when somebody says, "Oh, I'm doing HIIT," it can be sexy. It sounds sexy because one of the purported benefits of HIIT is you can achieve similar cardiovascular fitness in a fraction of the time. Why would I want to run for 60 minutes if I could do HIIT for 15 and get the same benefits? Of course, that is an easy sell. Time efficiency. What a lot of people don't understand is that there are a couple of other factors involved in order to take full advantage of HIIT. And I think that is why it's really important for us to understand the differences between HIIT because of expectations. If the expectations of results from a particular program or the purported benefits of the program don't actually match up to the expectations of reality and the results that you're actually getting, then that might lead you down a road of frustration, disappointment, and possibly even failure. A lot of people do HIIT. They work hard, they bust their butt without seeing the results, and they don't know why. I'm doing HIIT. I should get lean. I should get cut out. This article on Men's Health or Oxygen said, if I do HIIT, I'm going to get shredded. Why aren't I getting shredded? Right? First and foremost, exercise is a very inefficient, poor way to lose fat and lose weight. That's a topic for a different day. I'm sure we're going to get into it, and that's another controversial, another can of worms that I would love to open up. It's already half open, but we're going to open it up soon. We're going to open up all the way soon. We're going to talk about HIIT today because, again, that's another can of worms and it's already oozing out. Okay, let's stop talking about worms. So high-intensity interval training, the first thing that we want to understand about high-intensity interval training, it is a percentage of your maximum heart rate. A lot of people don't know what their maximum heart rate is. So it's very difficult for them to even say that they're engaging in high intensity interval training. Subjectively, they might feel they're working hard, they're sweating, they're grunting, and they're out of breath. So it's high intensity interval training, right? The class also says it's high intensity interval training. Oh, I'm going to New York Sports Club and this class says HIIT, body burn, it's high intensity interval training. The problem is it's very difficult for a class to say that it's technically high intensity interval training when you're in there. You may be fit, you may be a general fitness population, you might go to these classes, you might go to a cycle class 5 days a week, and then there's somebody who's 150 pounds overweight next to you, and they're technically doing HIIT, or at least they're doing HIIT because the class says it's HIIT. It's very difficult to broad straight generalize high intensity interval training, especially since it's based off of a percentage. It's based off of the actual work output. We're going to get into that. So high intensity interval training, number one, it has to be above 90% of your VO2 max or your maximum heart rate. They're very similar. The numbers are very similar. Now, VO2 max is basically your body's ability to consume oxygen using all sorts of different factors, your training history, what you're actually doing, what type of exercise you're doing. Obviously, if you're on a cycling bike, your VO2 max, the way that you're going to achieve your VO2 max is going to be different than if you run, which lends credence to this theory of specificity. Specificity basically means if you want to achieve a specific outcome, the way you achieve that outcome should be specific to that outcome. Meaning, if you want to get better at running, run. If you want to get better at squat jumps, squat jump. If you want to get better at swimming, then swim. That is really the essence of specificity. And high intensity interval training plays into specificity. So if you're trying to do high intensity interval training at an outdoor boot camp class and you want to be a better runner, you're not seeing the results that you want, well, that's because you're disobeying the law of specificity or the principle of specificity. It is a set in stone principle in exercise physiology. I think that's the first thing that we want to understand about how high intensity interval training pertains to different types of exercise modalities. So 90% of your VO2 max. There are formulas out there to do VO2 max. The most accurate way to do it is hook yourself up to a breathing mask, and it measures how much oxygen you're bringing in. The test goes on for however long until your heart rate gets to the point where you're not able to sustain it for a certain amount of time. The simplest equation is maximum millimeters or milliliters of oxygen consumed in 1 minute over your body weight in kilograms, and that's how you're going to get your VO2 max. You can also take your maximum heart rate and get above 90% of your maximum heart rate to get close to your VO2 max, or to get a better representation, easier, quick and dirty representation of HIIT. There are two ways you can do it. The first one is just a quick and dirty formula, 220 minus your age. Let's say, for example, I'm 20, which I'm not. 220 minus 20 will be 200. 90% of that will be 180. If I want to exercise in the HIIT zone, I should be at 180 beats per minute or above. In order for me to see that, I got to bust my butt, work as hard as I can. Right afterwards, take my pulse. Take my pulse on your wrist. Don't do this because you'll pass out. You don't want to clog. You don't want to cut off both your carotids. Take your pulse, multiply it by 15 or multiply it by 4. So you take your pulse for 15 seconds, multiply it by 4. I'm getting tongue-tied here. And that'll give you beats per minute. If I'm at 180 or above, I'm in the HIIT zone. The next formula is called the Carbonen formula, K-A-R-V-O-N-E-N. It's a more precise formula. I don't really know it off the top of my head, and I don't want to Google it while I'm doing this video, but you can look it up, Carbonen formula. You can plug in the numbers and it'll spit out a much more precise number. It'll give or take 10 to 15%. It's much more precise, and you can use that as you're taking your pulse to determine if you're in the HIIT zone. After you determine that, now you have to figure out, well, how long can you work out in that 90% and above zone. That is going to really tell you or elucidate whether or not you're doing HIIT or not. The average person, I'm talking about average, we're not talking about Usain Bolt, because Usain Bolt's a demigod, can only maintain 90% of their VO2 max, maximum heart rate, for 15-20 seconds if they're lucky, if they're at the above of average. If we were to take Usain Bolt as an example, Usain Bolt's 100-meter time versus his 200-meter time, almost the same. So if you take his 100-meter time and multiply it by 2, you're going to get pretty much his identical time, doubled. That is extremely rare. I think only a handful of people have ever achieved that before, because that's very difficult. So 9 times 2, 18 seconds. That's simplistic. It's his world record time is not actually 9, but we're just taking it simplistic for simplistic sakes. Most people can't do that. The average human being can probably maintain maximum heart rate or maximum VO2 max for about 15 seconds, 20 seconds if we're really, really pushing it. So if you're in this supposed HIIT class and you're doing an exercise for 30, 35, 40 seconds and then you rest for 20 seconds and you do it again, that's technically not HIIT, even if subjectively you feel like you're busting your butt. The next thing we want to cover with HIIT is the type of exercise we're doing in order to achieve HIIT. And this is what I was alluding to before, the law of specificity. You cannot achieve VO2 max with certain exercises simply because you're going to be limited by your technique, limited by what you can do. If you're not a good squatter, if you don't have proper squat form, if you don't have proper technique in your push-up, it's going to be very difficult for you to hit this HIIT zone, this VO2 max zone, because when it comes to resistance training, you're going to be limited by fatigue and technique of your muscles, not your cardiovascular system. Your cardiovascular system can go on for a very long time, but your muscles have a different process. It uses creatine, it uses glucose, it has a much shorter burst, high intensity energy system that can't really keep up with your cardiovascular system. So what you have to do is you have to use a type of exercise that allows you to bust your butt for extended periods of time and then measure your heart rate. Running, cycling are two of the best examples. They're very linear, they're boring, and they're focused, just one directional. That way, you can actually have a much better reading when it comes to VO2 max. And that is also why most research looks at either the treadmill test or the bike or the cycling test to measure VO2 max, because they understand not all exercise is created equal when we're trying to elicit the effects of HIIT. All right, so that is the specificity law. We want to make sure we're using the right type of exercise to assess if we're actually doing HIIT. Suffice it to say, if you're mixing this exercise with that exercise, it's technically not HIIT, even though you're out of breath, okay? And even though you're out of breath and technically, okay, you know what? I'll say this. Even if you can get 90% of your maximum heart rate using resistance training, that usually, according to research, does not translate into better cardiovascular endurance because you're not being specific enough with your efforts. If you improve in your capacity to do push-ups in a certain amount of time, you'll get better at push-ups. If you want to do push-ups, or if you're in a push-up contest, that could be fantastic. But if you want to do a traditional sporting event such as a marathon or cycling or swimming, then you want to be specific with what you're doing, and that is how you're going to use HIIT to improve your performance. The next thing we want to look at are trained individuals. Somebody who is trained is going to see very different results than somebody who is untrained when it comes to high-intensity interval training. High-intensity interval training spawned from researchers and exercise physiologists' curiosity on how to improve the performance of elite athletes, because when you're an elite athlete, your body's already adapted. If you're an elite marathoner, you've ran thousands of miles per year for years on end, maybe for 10, 15, 20 years. Your body already knows how to run. What can we do to get your body to adapt even better? For example, the first person, Roger Bannister, to have ever ran for a 4-minute mile, what did he do that other people didn't do in order to achieve that world record, to achieve that milestone of the 4-minute mile? You have to push yourself harder. You have to push the intensity, because once you're no longer able to perform more volume, because if you do more volume, let's say you run more miles, that's more wear and tear. So then what do you have to do? You have to try to take the same amount of mileage and make them more efficient. Efficient being increase the intensity, run faster, run harder, cycle faster. And what they found is when they did these with elite trained athletes within the confines and structure of an already existing endurance program, their cardiovascular fitness improved. So in other words, what they were able to achieve in 15 minutes, they got as if they did it for 60 minutes. And what a lot of people did was took that research and extrapolated it into the general fitness, thinking if you work hard for 15 minutes, your general fitness, you're going to get the same results than if you were to go to the gym for 60 minutes. That's an easy sell. Work out for 15 minutes, get the same results as if I did for 60. The problem is it's not so simple. There hasn't been research studies long enough. I think the average research study is like 6 to 8 weeks, long enough to substantiate whether or not if somebody general fitness like you who goes to the gym 5 days a week, just do the random stuff, will see the same amount of benefits or at the same rate as somebody who actually trained for 60 minutes. Because even researchers will admit there is no substitute for sustained cardiovascular endurance work. If there was, and HIIT was the substitute, why do world-class marathoners and cyclists still perform sustained exercise? Because they understand that that's what they need to do for their body to maintain not only their fitness, but also to keep them competitive so that they have a foundation to continue building on with high-intensity interval training. If you take high-intensity interval training and you build it on a foundation of an already strong endurance system, then you're going to see much better results. But when you add high-intensity interval training on a non-existent or very low, poorly refined endurance system, you may not see the results at the same rate. It might be very misleading. I know that was pretty technical. I know that can get long. The things that we want to take away from this is, number one, you have to work hard. You have to be above 90% of your VO2 max. And if you are in doubt, find the formula, the Carbonian formula. Try to find your VO2 max. Hook yourself up to a breath mask. See if you can get a VO2 max test, either on a treadmill or a cycling. See where you are. Take your heart rate after a really strong, heavy, hard bout of something. See if it's above 90% of your maximum heart rate, and we're getting closer to HIIT. I know these are nuanced, and in fact, I'm thinking to myself as I'm talking, it should be called maximum intensity interval training, because we're trying to get to 100% of your heart rate. Anything above that, you're entering into the red zone of stroke and heart attack. High intensity could be a wide range. High intensity for somebody could be 75%. But what we want to understand is high intensity is really predicated on busting your butt, working hard, which is something that many people don't do because it's not comfortable. It's not pleasant to bust your butt, to go on sprints, sprint repeats, go sprint hills and things like that. It's not pleasant. It hurts. It's hard, and you have to do it. You have to volunteer to do it, especially if you're not getting paid to do it. It's a tough sell. Even if you know if you did it for 15 minutes, it's equivalent to 60 minutes, because when you're doing that for those 15 minutes, it seems like 60 minutes. I'm telling you this right now, and I'm saying this from the perspective of a personal trainer. High intensity interval training is not easy. It's not something that you look forward to doing unless you do it with somebody fun. So remember, it's a percentage. You have to work hard. You have to bust your butt. The way high intensity interval training affects somebody who's trained versus somebody who's untrained is very, very different. And it's still unknown. It's still questionable on whether or not high intensity interval training, or 15 minutes of high intensity interval training, still translates into 60 minutes of sustained work in an average general fitness individual. Oh, and by the way, as research shows, they consider high intensity interval training for the average trained sports athlete 600 kilojoules in 15 minutes. In other words, they burned 150 calories in 15 minutes. That translates into 600 calories in an hour. For some people, that might be very possible. For some other people, that may not be. That was an average. So I hope that little tidbit of information gave you a better idea. If you wear a Fitbit or you track your calories, maybe it'll give you a better idea. Just be mindful. Not all those Fitbits are not always accurate. All right, so this was a thing on HIIT. I know we covered a lot. I know I'm rambling on. I'm just going off the top of my head. Some of the things that were just floating around, some questions I wanted to address. But regardless, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, if you want me to clarify something, you got comments, you want to provide feedback, maybe I was wrong somewhere, because that could be very likely, please shoot me a message or an email to david@strongbylee.com. I want to continue this conversation about HIIT, because these are some of the things I am really passionate about. I hope you can tell. All right, so until next time, hit it.